Okay, from handsets and minutes to handsets. Our next speaker is Bill Eldredge. He's the Senior Manager of the Data Asset at Nokia. So as I do this, why don't you give him a warm welcome. Came all the way from Connecticut for me.
Thank you, welcome up. All getting set up. I used to like to start this off, particularly since it's about 4 o'clock. A little audience participation might be good. Show of hands, how many people have ever owned a Nokia phone? Keep them up if that was 10 years ago or more. All right, put them down. I'm really hoping we can get one this time. How many people in this room have a Nokia phone now? Okay. You may have seen, hopefully you saw recently, that the Windows Phone operating system moved to adopt is now the third in the list of mobile phone operating systems in the world. Not exactly nipping at the heels of Android or Apple yet, but hopefully soon. We're making progress in the right direction. But we still do have over 1 billion people in the world who have Nokia phones. Those phones and the applications and the platform I'm going to talk about do throw off a lot of data. And so we've had and continue to have a big data problem. And what I'd like to do today is just quickly introduce you to what those issues are, and then go through a few of the lessons we've learned over roughly 3 years of deploying and using big data technologies. Hopefully you can learn from it and avoid some of the mistakes that we've made. So first of all, Nokia's data challenge. I'm going to keep going with the question theme, and you don't have to raise your hand this time, but I am going to ask you to think in your mind and answer this question. So in what country is Nokia headquartered? All right, how many people said Finland? All right, that's good, thank you very much. Okay, second question. In what year, or I'll even give you a decade, was Nokia founded? You can't yell it out. 1865, there we go. So it's an old company, and there's Fredrik Ibsen, who founded the company back then. Obviously, not a mobile phone manufacturer at that point. It was a manufacturer of rubber boots, taking its name from one of the rivers that one of the factories was powered by. And after many decades of doing that, we made the huge strategic leap of going from rubber boots to rubber tires. And basically Nokia became Goodyear, Firestone of Finland. But along the line, then you also start to get into radial tires and cabling, and that cabling led into telecommunications equipment, and finally, beauties like this one, and the first mobile phone operating system, Symbian. And then just to show a picture probably of the phone that everybody in this room who raised their hand had at one point, the 5150, because I certainly had it, with the AT&T Across America plan. First really mobile across America plan that would allow you to do roaming wherever. And that was really the height of our penetration into the US market. And sadly, we kind of neglected that for a long time, really reversing that trend now. But as we continue to progress, sold a lot of phones that looked a lot like that, and got to 1 billion subscribers. But that started to lose momentum, and competition was really accelerating. So we moved aggressively into the space of location-based services, and particularly with the acquisition of Navtech roughly about 5 years ago, and the merging of that with some of the existing similar efforts we had within Nokia in Berlin and Finland. So we've recently rebranded that platform to be the HERE platform, and it's not new. Obviously, Navtech's not new, and it's probably the most fully functional platform-agnostic location-based services platform in the world. Roughly 4 out of every 5 in-dash navigation systems calls our APIs to actually get you where you need to go. But that wasn't the last strategic move we made. As I alluded to before, a little over close to a year and a half ago, we decided to ditch Symbian, at least for our smartphone operating system, and go entirely to Windows Mobile. We still continue to expand, though, in Symbian in the lower-end phones. Our Asha line is a new line of smartphone-like phones that sell at a much lower price point for appropriate segments. So that's kind of a little bit of the background of where we've been, and where we really want to go to that theme is to enable all four of what we call the cardinal W's. And if we look at who can help you find the what, obviously Google and Yahoo and even Bing are very good at that. Facebook and Baidu and MySpace and others help you connect and really are focused on the who. We're really focused on the where, and I know obviously we have a great competition from Google and others in that regard. But if we combine that, in the end, it's not just offering the platform, but it's combining that with the when, which I don't think anybody right now has a handle on, and put together something where we can add that element, as several of the speakers have said, of location and time to search and social, the things that people tend to do on their phone, to really create rich mobile experiences with devices that sense the world, the Internet of Things. That's really our end goal, and we are starting to use, even though we've been collecting data for a while, we are really starting to use big data technologies to enable that. Briefly, we've got this platform that we offer out to enterprises everywhere. We also use it ourselves for the applications that you see there of Drive and in public transit, such. And there's a whole range of devices that leverage this. And of course, as I said before, that throws off an awful lot of data. Now, it's not maybe to the scale, certainly not to the scale of many of the other big data practitioners out there. We're talking here about a Hadoop cluster that crossed a petabyte sometime last year. So it's not enormous, it's not exabytes, but it's certainly data that doesn't fit, as Kevin was saying, nicely into a traditional relational database. But that's now, and back then we were trying at different places across Nokia in 2010 to get a handle on this stuff. So we had a couple sort of experimental Hadoop clusters along with some legacy Oracle and MySQL, and then one big Teradata instance, a data warehouse in Finland. And in the end, I was in a group, still in the group that sort of on the services side of the business, the here side of the business. And what we thought we could do with an entrepreneurial spirit and with some background in software development was to develop common platforms that leverage open source technologies, including Hadoop. So we thought, okay, well, let's give this thing a shot. And as we were thinking through why and how we might do it, we had several questions, including, well, can we do this ourselves, or do we really need help in getting this done? If we build it, will people actually use it? Maybe people are pretty happy, as Kevin was saying before, with their own little siloed stovepipe of data, and maybe we'll build something and no one's going to use it. Importantly, will it actually pay off? Are we going to just continue to buy servers and not know whether or not we're getting the business value out of it? And then finally, can we just build one big cluster and keep adding servers, or do we need to have a much more fully functioned sort of set of offerings for different levels of SLAs and such? So I'm not going to give the answers now, but we'll get back to them in a second. I'm going to tell you what we ended up building and what we've had for a while. Very simplified picture of our architecture. Above the line, about a third way down, it sort of divides the fast world from the slow world. So the fast world where consumers are actually using their applications. So we have touch points on those devices, actually more to the point on applications. We put a little bug, as it were, on each application that wants to integrate with that collection method, and can bring that data back in when the customer has a data connection to understand about app usage and, of course, device usage. And then down at the bottom, we've got other streaming data sources kind of coming in, bulk data sources. They all come into the Hadoop cluster. And then we do have right now an Oracle and a small MySQL database. There are other data sets, databases out that we also distribute data to. The general principle of trying to keep sort of the big stuff on Hadoop and more aggregated stuff in relational databases. And then the traditional reporting and statistical analysis tools sit on top of those. So, I think the point there is we didn't throw away the old, right? We had a lot of things that Hadoop replaced, but it's not everything. But what we did get to at this point is something, and this flower graph here, I'll just explain a bit. We've struggled as well to bring a central asset together of disparate and heterogeneous data sets, but still provide some order and commonality. So these levels are the services and applications and data sets are ways of grouping this thing. So within 52 different services, and there's sort of different definitions of what that means, there might be several applications that service that builds that service, and within that, each application might throw off several different data sets. So we've got that ordering, and altogether, we've got roughly a bit over a petabyte of data. But it's continuing to come in. We're also actually actively managing it a lot better these days than we were in the first couple of years. So we're holding pretty steady at that 1.1 petabyte, being a little better about data management. But in the end, we've got all this data, and we still have not really gotten to a point where Nokia is leveraging this as much as it can be for business value. So we started to rethink these, what we're doing and whether we want to take a slightly different approach. And so we're going back with our lessons learned and asking those same questions again ourselves, and hopefully these are the questions that will help you as well. So I'm going to walk through each one of these and our current thinking from our experience. So doing it ourselves or doing it with help, when we started off in 2010, we did put together a team in Bangalore of software developers who created our initial instance, but had a lot of help from Cloudera. We used the Cloudera distribution for Hadoop, extended it, built our own small cluster, and launched it and announced it to the world. As we went in 2011, we expanded that team of developers fairly substantially, and the functionality and the cluster size. And then continued to have Cloudera on for more critical support, and brought in our IT ops team to help support this thing. But it wasn't the 24/7 thing, and it's not the same level of SLA you'd get with a traditional relational database. But at least we have some help in responding to customer issues. 2012, we continued to expand, got up to a full capacity of about 1.5 terabytes. So we're kind of right at the edge of what you're supposed to do for capacity of about 65–70%. Still have Cloudera for technical critical support, but frankly, we've been having issues with the performance of the cluster, a lot of different jobs running, and particularly we see issues when there's large bulk loads and processing going on, and that interferes with some of the other more critical business reporting and analysis. So we've made the strategic decision to basically move off our bare metal and go into Amazon Web Services this year. So we've already started that transition. And as I'll say again, we're sort of taking the opportunity to rethink not just that, but everything we're doing. So if we build it, will they come? I've kind of sort of implicitly answered that already, but when we started off, we did get a fair amount of early adoption from the people who had their own Hadoop clusters, and they said, fine, it's free. I don't have to worry about admin. Great, okay, I'll contribute the data that I have. But largely our customers were of two types. It was either that, and it was the data scientists who said, okay, great, thanks, I've got a space to go do my individual analyses, thank you very much. or it was completely black box where we had existing reports or something delivered to a business and we're switching out the back end and they don't really have any knowledge of that. But we started to get some knowledge and a little bit of cost savings ourselves. Then in 2012, though, has really come what, not so much a data tsunami, but as I'm saying, a sation. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. It's really from the Great Lakes, but if you get different pressure on different sides of Great Lakes, of a Great Lake, the water will kind of slosh to one side and then will come back. And as it comes back, it doesn't come back in a tsunami, but it comes back and like a wave will come to shore, and then the next one will just go on top of it, and then the next one will go on top of it. So that's the level of growth we started to see, particularly now. In addition, we got a lot more sort of gray box users, people who knew a little bit about it but needed a lot of support. So our need for supporting customers went up substantially. We still had sort of a loose collection of data assets, so it wasn't completely a Wild West where everything was disordered, but it's a pretty loose neighborhood, and so not everybody plays by all the same rules and knows what everybody else is doing, which causes problems. And in the end, it was still the interfaces for using this data are not what the bulk of Nokians would find something they could use. It's a CLI, or it's maybe a not so fully functioned Hue interface for using the Hive SQL, which is the Hadoop ecosystem version of SQL. So for that reason as well, we've decided this year our priority really has to be, as we move to AWS, of creating an easy-to-use self-serve offering for non-technical users. So when we talk about big data, typically you're not talking about these kind of customers, right? We've got the 200, 300, 400 users within Nokia who can code native Java, or at least are pretty adept at SQL and can do sophisticated Hive queries. We're really trying to build something now with a couple layers on top that is usable by everybody. So it's a big data challenge, but it's also a sort of traditional business intelligence or just business data democratization problem. Okay, so will it pay off? Initially, we were just a big cost center, right? It was free, and everybody put their data there. And our focus, frankly, was just getting a critical mass so we could have something to sell to other people as well. In 2012, we really focused on the cost savings side of things. So, as I mentioned, the Teradata platform was trying to ingest a lot of this data and hold it, and that just it was actually $20,000 per terabyte, as opposed to roughly $2,000 from our Hadoop cluster. So we agreed with that team that we would have a general principle of keeping the event level data on Hadoop and move just only maybe the critical event level data or some low level aggregate to Teradata. And in the end, that saved about 6 million euros. So fairly substantial savings there. We also had recommendations for a music service that were outsourced to a third party. We paid a lot of money for that every year. And we had just a small team of data scientists basically replicate that and do better, because then we, rather than using whatever that third party had for music recommendations, we used our own data and could augment it to get better recommendations and save lots of money too. So there's other things we did there to save money, save license fees. But we really didn't start until towards the end of 2012 to start to use it specifically for CRM or for improving the quality of devices or the applications we put out to customers. And for 2013, we really have focused largely on that. We've got a few very key spearhead business priorities that we're focused on supporting. Reducing inventory in the channel, increasing the number of contactable customers through using big data analysis. But then also democratizing decision making, right? Allowing this big data asset to be used by all Nokians. Lastly, one cluster for all the needs. It's nice to be able to integrate things very easily. Like, you don't have to do a lot of upfront modeling. You sort of put a folder structure down and start to get the data in. And in that sense, big data is very nice. But if you're doing it yourself, there's a lot of long lead time in adding more nodes. At least we were. And then we started to see the seeds of what would eventually become a significant problem in the FAIR scheduler. Sort of comes out of the box with the CDH and with Hadoop, which really is supposed to allocate resources properly across different jobs and different customers. It really doesn't. So we got a lot of resource contention starting. And then 2012, everything started to kind of snowball. And so we got a lot more jobs, a lot more customers, right? That was good. We were delivering value to a lot more people. But a lot more jobs running against more and more disparate data, very spiky, heavy, occasional jobs that would really throw everything off. And while we tried to mitigate that by creating our own version of guaranteed resource pooling, we really started to get more customer complaints, more downtime, more issues with delays, and we're still a cost center. We had no way to allocate costs effectively. So for all those reasons, we're going to AWS, particularly here, because it allows you to divide those things, right? We can have a specific Elastic MapReduce cluster dedicated to a particular job. And we know how much it costs, and we know what we can bill to an internal customer or what we don't want to bill, but we know the cost of actually processing that data and storing that data. Additionally, I talked before about a business intelligence problem, but as we're rethinking about this infrastructure and how we process things, we're also thinking about how we should think about the asset. As I said before, you can have these different data sets sort of sitting separately, and you can use them in that way and leave them that way. But what we believe is a better approach is if we manipulate, modify, ETL the data enough so that we still have canonical structures. The date fields are always in the same format, so you can do the same kind of analysis on them. We might, if one key is hashed over here of a customer ID, it's not over here, well, we're going to hash it the same way I have a complete system. So these things can be joined much more easily. And then in the end, linking that not through some physical or logical data model in which we're trying to force everything, but a graph-based metadata model. So we can see the leverage what's been done by Facebook and others to see the relationships not between people necessarily, but between data sets, and allow users to more easily see the possibilities of joining, combining, and linking these assets. So in the end, my advice would be, if you're thinking about doing things, you should definitely evaluate public cloud options first. When we were looking, Amazon and then the Microsoft offering were the two main options. There are other options now. But I would say if you have to ask yourself why you wouldn't do it in a public cloud. But when you start, you need help. All of us need help, and I think that it's always good to have, we have a large reservoir of industry knowledge here that can really help. Will they come? I think the lesson we have learned is that we put the technology first and said, let's get data in. We didn't think as much as we should have around user needs and what is the business value that this is going to deliver. We tried to see whether it was going to work. But talk to the business, understand what business problems this might solve, and make it easy to use. Will it pay? I think up front, you should decide whether or not you're going to allocate costs or not, so that significantly changes your business case, right? Because if a particular business process has its own costs of storing and processing the data and its own benefits, it's a lot easier to see that relationship than if you have a cost center. And think through those high-value business opportunities and whether or not big data technology is really appropriate to solve that. And in the end, I think the answer to one cluster is, yeah, if you're going to say to the business, we'll fix your problems, we'll solve your problems, give us your problems, give us your data, and we'll run the cluster in a way that's efficient. If you're going to offer a common resource, it's going to get out of hand too quickly. So either set up separate clusters, go to the public cloud, or control things more than we did. So that's it. I think Kevin's got a question already. So.
There are multi-tenancy solutions that people are talking about. We had the same problem at Yahoo, which you mentioned.
Right.
And we actually created separate clusters for production and for research for that reason. Completely
All I know is that some of the guys in Bangalore looked into those briefly. As I said, we kind of, and maybe it wasn't Bill here, I don't know, but we tried to try and solve it ourselves by developing our own resource pooling within the cluster, but we didn't look enough into that I think we can say one way or the other.
In terms of deciding to use the public cloud, obviously the big question is security and privacy. And while we can look at the public cloud and say, gosh, it's encrypted, it's secure, there's no way anyone can get to it, how did you get past your internal legal and other folks, to get them to agree to say, yeah, the public cloud is a good place to go?
We haven't. We still have to get approval for every data set. And we have, fairly sensitive data too. We don't we don't have credit card information. We don't have some of the really nasty stuff. But we just have to get every element of our solution approved by the security folks, go through the risks and the percentage likelihood that risk is going to happen, what the business impact is going to be, and someone has to buy off on the risk. And in the end, it's going to be probably my boss in combination with the business owner that owns that data. But that's the arrangement we're going forward with.
Do you see that it potentially could hamper productivity if there's some sort of, is the benefit outweighing the cost in terms of the potential risk of productivity as you kind of move data very quickly to do some analysis?
So you're not talking about productivity if someone's distracted by a leak or something like that. You're saying actually.
Just in terms of just the process to get data on the public cloud and analyze it.
In our experience, it's no different. I mean, we can get data into S3 as fast as we can get it into our own cluster and analyze it just as fast. So that's the one, I think, thing I'm worried about is the latency of every query, right? So to what extent do we have stuff in an always-on cluster, which gets expensive, versus forcing every job to spin up an EMR cluster, which takes 10 minutes on its own before it even thinks about getting going. So I'm worried about that, but in terms of, I don't see it as much different in terms of getting data in or getting it out. Anything else? Yep.
Can you comment a little bit on the analytics side of the exercise you've gone through? I mean, it sounds like a lot of the data storage was clustered.
Right.
You use multiple analytics tools. Did you find a tool set that worked best with the data set you work with, or could you comment just generally?
Our data scientists largely use R, and there's a version of R that's available that runs just directly on top of Hadoop. We do have people who extract it and then use an extract in SPSS. So those are the things for more advanced analysis. That's typically what we're using, sometimes just native MapReduce jobs. But it can be compatible with pretty much anything if you extract out the right data set. So. Thank you very much.